Hello and welcome to Sensei podcast. This is Manos Brilakis discussing with leaders in the field of CTO and complex PCI. Sensei means teacher or master in Japanese. The goal of the Sensei podcast is to help you learn and improve in CTO and complex PCI so that you can become the best that you can be and offer your patients the best possible results. Hello everyone and welcome to Sensei Podcast. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Raj Chandwaney from the Oklahoma Heart Institute in Tulsa, Oklahoma, an expert CTO operator, a great friend and collaborator with Progress CTO for many, many years. Raj, thank you so much for taking the time today to be with us and super excited to discuss with you about your journey in learning CTO and complex PCI.
Oh, thank you, Manos. It's an honor for me to be a part of this podcast. I've been listening in to all the most of the sessions and all the great people that you've been hosting here, and I'm really honored that you would ask me to be a part of this.
Raj, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you start? How did you get into intervention? How did you get into the complex intervention area?
Sure. I've been in practice now 20 years. It was 20 years this summer. I did my training up in Chicago at Northwestern University. With Charlie Davidson was my mentor there. And I came down to Tulsa. My first job out of fellowship with this, at that time we were a private group, Oklahoma Heart Institute in Tulsa. I was the 12th person to join the group. And, part of what attracted me to coming down to Tulsa was the magnitude of coronary artery disease in Oklahoma. We often rank as the 50th worst state for CAD death rate by the American Heart Association. So there's a lot of disease down here, and I wanted to be busy right out of the starting gates and coming down to Tulsa. And I met my senior partner, Wayne Leinbach here, who's a very charismatic person and had big dreams for our program. And it just seemed like an exciting place to be. My first 2 years in practice, I consciously was very conservative. I'm trying to remember who told me this, but a colleague had mentioned to me, we know you've been trained to do a lot of amazing things up at Northwestern, but when you start off in practice, you're referring primary care doctors, even your non-invasive cardiologists who send you patients, they often don't understand the complexity of a case that you're taking on, but they understand complications. And they, if a young operator comes out and gets a lot of complications early on, they're not going to understand that you were taking on something very difficult, but it can really shatter your reputation up front. And I know this is a conservative approach that is probably a hard thing. Nowadays we have these CHIP fellows coming straight out of training, and a hard thing for people to hear. But I think it's a real phenomenon that you can really destroy your reputation in the community if you take on too much too soon and have bad things happen. So I was very safe my first 2 years, consciously. Probably sent more patients for CABG than I ever have the remainder of my career. As far as doing CTOs, I feel like after those first 2 years, it was something I would always take on when appropriate. But clearly in those early years, it was very selected patients, nice tapered cap, short length, high chance for success. Didn't have much I could do, just I was antegrade wiring through a over-the-wire balloon. But I was never afraid to take on those cases. Success rates weren't, great, maybe 50% at best, very low JCTO scores. But, I did early on recognize the importance of two catheters and visualizing the distal vessel to make sure that when I advanced my wire was in the true lumen before I started putting a balloon across there. So those were things I always did. But back then it'd probably be, 1 or 2 cases a year, very symptomatic people, high chance of success.
And this was before the retrograde, this was before the algorithm, this was the very early days of CTO PCI.
Yeah. But then I remember going to conferences maybe 15 years ago, I'd go to SCI and TCT and ACC's interventional conference, and there'd be some Japanese operators presenting these amazing cases, which just blew me away. And honestly, I was so excited to see their cases, but from a practical perspective, because they were often honest that, someone would ask, how long did that case take you? And they'd say 7 hours. And, down here in Tulsa, we were just so busy just with acute coronary syndromes. And at that stage, we didn't have that many operators. There was a time 4 or 5 years into my career, we dropped to 3 interventionalists covering 2 hospitals and a very busy STEMI program. And so it just wasn't something I could practically take on with what they were showing. But still, it amazed me. And then I remember Bill started speaking right around, I think, a year or 2 after I met some of the Japanese operators. I started seeing Bill on the circuit, presenting some of the things that he was doing and learning. It just blew me away. But I also remember thinking, he's Superman and I'll never be like him. There's just something special there. And I was honestly, I had some skepticism, whether I could do it. Also, whether there was some, I don't know if we want to call it publication bias or presentation bias, where, people were standing up there showing their great outcomes, but there were some bad, scary outcomes that they weren't telling us about. And then I remember, I think it was in 2011, you guys put together the hybrid algorithm. I think it finally got published in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. I remember reading that paper of yours and just being fascinated with what you guys had put together, this way to conceptually think about it. Because honestly, before that, if I listened to a Japanese operator, and this sounds so American-centric for someone who wasn't even born in this country. I was born in India. But, I had trouble understanding what they were saying and how they were thinking through it. And then even when Bill would present cases, honestly, he was so beyond where I was, I couldn't really follow his train of thought. But when you guys published the hybrid algorithm, it really helped me understand how to assess the anatomy, think about a case. I remember later in 2012 attending a meeting and the data of a single operator, a case series, and it's showing a 90+% success rate, only a 1% tamponade rate. I was really getting excited, but still concerned. These were just super people that the rest of us could not follow. I think it was 2013, 2014, some case series of multiple sites, multiple operators started coming out in the literature. I think the first one I saw was 5 different operators at 5 different centers applying the hybrid algorithm, 90+% success, tamponade rates around 1% or so, 1% to 2%. And that's when I was like, ooh, this might be something I could do. And then right around that time, our good friend, James Choi, who you got to know very well during your years in Dallas, James and I did our fellowship together at Northwestern. He's actually a year younger than me in the fellowship program. And every year we have a Northwestern fellowship reunion, and we all will bring our best and worst cases of the year. And he brought a retrograde CTO case that he had completed. And I was just totally enamored, and I just sat down with him and tried to understand every step of what he did. That's when I was, the data, plus James inspiring me with his case, I was in. I was committed. I was like, I need to learn these techniques so that I can offer my patients the most progressive options available. Because I think really what drove me, I should say, was patient need. By then I was accumulating a large practice, and you accumulate a lot of patients. You worked on their ACS vessel, and now I'm in private practice, so they're my patients the rest of their life, the rest of my career, and they had these CTOs and they needed help, and I wanted to offer them the most progressive options available, and that's really how I got into all this.
So this is now about 10 years since you started your practice, right? So you're very experienced already. You have a lot of clinical expertise, and you've done a lot of cases.
Yeah, I would say 2014 is when I jumped wholeheartedly into CTOs. So I'd say 9 years now, 9+ years of applying the algorithms and doing advanced CTO cases now. Yeah.
And then, So you saw that, you read the papers, you saw some of the published cases, you saw some of the cases, but how did you actually learn it? Did you just start doing it yourself? Did you have some people to help you? How did you actually build your CTO and complex skills?
Yeah, I think my path might be a little bit different. It's probably more like those of you who paved the way for us, in that I actually never used proctors. It wasn't something I thought to do. By that stage in my career, I'd already learned several other areas that I wasn't trained in fellowship. I started doing carotid stenting. I was doing a lot of peripheral vascular disease, a lot of SFA, CTO work already. And with none of those, things did I bring proctors into my laboratory. So for me, it felt very natural to just study, go to conferences, observe cases, and going to meetings, and then most of all reading. And Manos, your book is probably the most instrumental thing in my CTO education. I think you published your first edition of the CTO manual in 2014. And gosh, when I got my hands on that, I read it cover to cover twice within about 3 weeks. And that was that year that I was really committed to doing this. And I wanted to make sure I had everything between my ears that I needed to do these cases. So, and I honestly, I don't know if it's vanity or, but I was very confident in my ability to retain information. That's something I've been confident about in my abilities, that I can read things and retain them and not you apply them for many months, yeah. But it's still luckily they're in my brain and I'm able to pull it out. A solution that I haven't had to apply since reading about it in the textbook. So I had that comfort, I suppose, that maybe some people won't have, and a proctor could be helpful there. That, you're stuck and this is what you should do. And it's something you haven't done before. But I've been able to pull that stuff out of my brain, even if I haven't applied it in a long time. So, yeah, that was my learning pathway. I should point out, I did spend a day in Aaron Grantham's lab observing. I think it was 2 days. One of the companies had sponsored me to go there. That was very helpful. Sure. But that was actually after I'd already read your book. So I went there armed with so much information and so many nuanced questions for Aaron. I remember because there were 2 other people there, and I remember thinking, God, why are these other people here? Because they weren't really mentally prepared. I think they were just sort of there to watch the freak show of what a CTO operator can do. And Aaron was so gracious with my bombarding him with questions. I think he was also excited to have someone there that actually was interested and invested. About a year after that, I actually did a similar thing in Bill Lombardi's lab. Again, got to observe him for a couple of days in the lab. Nothing hands-on, just watching. But I think it was very helpful for me there because I had been doing cases. I'd read your book twice. So I had a list both times of very nuanced questions to help me advance my skills back home. Yeah.
So clearly you had a lot of passion, right, and energy. And not many people are able to go through books and articles and read at it and read again. So is that something you always had? Is that something that in this field that specifically fascinated you? Or how did that work for you?
Yeah, I think that is something I've had, where if I'm driven by my patient's care. That's always what drives me, and it drives me to get better and to become excellent. Try to get a little bit better each day. I always, my wife once accused me of being competitive, and I said, no, I'm not competitive with other people. I'm competitive with myself. Yesterday, I'm trying to beat the person I was yesterday and learn a little bit more each day. That's just been my nature. I'm not competitive around my partners or my friends or anyone. Just competitive with me and just trying to get better. And what drives that competitiveness is trying to take better care of my patients. Because, so there's so many people just really struggling, I find. By the time people get referred to someone like us, I don't think every CTO needs to be open, but there's just a lot of highly symptomatic patients with CTOs out there, at least in our community. And I feel like by the time they find us, they're really appreciative for what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And from the things that you've done, which one was the hardest thing to learn? Was it undergrad, retrograde, wiring, mental? What was the things that you found the most difficult to implement in your practice?
That's a great question. I think, definitely antegrade wiring came more natural. I would say retrograde was intimidating, but once I became comfortable with going through septals, that actually is not, you're either going to, I feel like you're either going to get through or you're not. Definitely epicardial collaterals are a very challenging thing. I feel that I'm still learning, but it's also something I think, I feel like it's a tool of last resort, and even as a tool of last resort, it's not a last resort for every patient. Sure. I think I always think 2 or 3 times before I take on a tortuous epicardial collateral. I would say that antegrade dissection reentry, it was a little bit more frustrating for me as I learned it, and part of that was I was already doing a lot of SFA CTO work, and I'm in the SFA. My favorite reentry device is the Outback, which I've been using since I started doing legs, and I'd gotten to a point with the Outback, especially in the SFA. I have probably a 95+% success of reentry. And it's just a very, a lot of folks nowadays would go to the Pioneer, which has ultrasound guidance, but the Outback is just so intuitive for me. And I'd gotten so good at reentry in the SFA that when I moved to the coronaries and was, doing Stingray, it was definitely much more frustrating, and the failure rate was higher than 5%, especially in the beginning. I think a lot of it has to do with, the size of the vessel we're trying to re-enter in, though. I think that probably stifled me the most, frustrated me the most at times. But it's come a long way. I'm still, not perfect, but I think I'm very good at Stingray re-entry. If it's a good target, I feel very confident I'm going to get it. The problem is so many of the patients we get referred just don't have a good distal target there to re-enter into, and then it starts disappearing on us as the case goes on.
Perfect. And this was, again, all of your personal experience. Did the device reps help you? Will you find some people who were able to explain some nuances and help you out with that? Or
yeah, I think a lot of it was, again, going to conferences, reading your papers, your book. You go into so much detail, really spelling out, what could go wrong. I love that part of every chapter that you have, what could go wrong here, and reading through those things. And then device reps were helpful. I think naturally, I think with the reps, there's their job is to sell a product, and there's a lot of optimism to get you to start using it. So I think for the basics, the reps were helpful, but I think beyond that, reading more, listening at the conferences to what people are saying they're doing, getting different people's perspectives. I think those are the best ways for me to learn.
And then, Raj, so as you said, you're in a very busy practice, high volume, a lot of acuity. And, CTO PCI, by its nature, you're not going to get to 100%. You're going to have failures. You're going to have complications as well. And obviously now you're much more established. People know you. But how did that, how do you deal with that? The failures and the complications, did they impact you? Were you able to bounce off them and move on? How did you deal with these inevitable obstacles around the way?
Yeah, I think I think this field is very humbling. I think it's important to enter it with humility and rather than vanity or a desire to become famous or anything like that. I think it's important for people who are thinking about going down this pathway to understand, you're going to go, for me, I'd already been 10, 11 years in practice, a busy operator with what I felt was probably a 99+% success rate on normal interventions. And some of them were, complex interventions, but not CTOs. And then you're transitioning, even if you're really good in those first few years, an 80% success rate on CTOs is good in those first few years when you're taking this on, I think. And that means 1 out of 5 times you fail and you have to go out and talk to the family. And after you've been in there 2 or 3 hours, because cases will take longer in the beginning. And, I think you have to be prepared for that, which I think I was based on, reading. And I think folks in the CTO community demonstrate a lot of humility and communicate it. I feel they're not just up there showing off when they're sharing their cases. And I've noticed people speak with humility when they're teaching these things. But I think it took getting used to. It's good to be mentally prepared for that and to go into this with humility. As far as complications, I'm going to talk a bit about acutely what happens with a complication for me, which is if I see a complication, the first thing I always do is I just take a deep breath. Sometimes you stop breathing in those situations, and that's not going to help you. Then I like to communicate to the staff. I like to verbalize. We've had a complication. I think sometimes the staff aren't. They don't notice the perforation that you just saw in the last film, or they don't notice that the pressures are dropping, and it's important to verbalize just so people. These are longer cases. I think for the staff, it's easy for their minds to wander while you're trying to work your way through the CTO. I don't have another doctor in the room when I'm doing these cases. I'm the only doctor in the room. So I need to sort of lead that ship and plus do what needs to be done. I think about being not at that moment to allow myself to stew on, gosh, why did I start this case? Why did I just make that mistake? Why did I just try that high-risk maneuver? Like I tell myself, this is not the time to stew. This is the time to fix this problem and make sure this patient survives this complication. And I actually will often think in my mind very quickly. I've heard Bill Lombardi say many times, I believe his father used to be a pilot for the airlines, and he'll often talk about how the research in the airline industry, there's all these studies that show when a plane crashes, it wasn't the first mishap that caused the plane crash, but it was the next 5 mistakes that the pilot made that led to the plane crashing. So I just remind myself of that you can, you've gone into these cases and you've thought about the different complications that are going to happen and how you're going to react. So just be methodical and analyzing the situation, fixing it. If it's a perf, the first thing, just inflate that balloon and stop the bleeding, and check your pressure. Do you need to tap them right away, or do you have time to stop the perf before you tap them? Those are the ways I would do it. And then later on, I definitely, I wouldn't say I get depressed, but I do ruminate on complications and often on failures. But it's probably not good for my own mental health that I do that. But I think it's good for my patients. I think it's good for us to learn from those complications, those failures, and think about what we might have done differently. I think that's what makes us good. My senior partner, Wayne Leinbach, he doesn't do CTO work, but early on in my career, he had once communicated to me once when I was stewing for weeks about something that went wrong. He said, that's okay. That's what makes good doctors. We don't want people in this practice that have a complication and just go home and sleep through the night. That's that's not the kind of person you want. I think those are we call those people sociopaths. Good doctors will think about these things, and it's hard. It's hard on your mental health. But this isn't, if this was an easy job, everyone would do it. We've all chosen to take this on, and I think it's important to reflect and ruminate when things go wrong, and not just walk away and move on like nothing happened.
Absolutely. And then also in terms of prevention and planning, do you have any specific habits, or how do you plan for these complex cases? Is there anything specific you do?
Sure. The way nowadays, most of the patients I'm actually doing are actually being referred to me from my partners, and nowadays from other providers in our community. And so I always, of course, I want to meet these patients in the office ahead of time. And I actually tell my office nurse, we can't schedule these patients until we get the films, because I want to look at the films before I even talk to them in the office. And once we get the films, I'll spend my first look, it'll probably be about 20 or 30 minutes looking at these films. And then I'll usually draft up my procedural plan, just like you taught me to do in your first edition. I'll say, okay, first strategy. I'll just put a couple of notes about the CTO anatomy. I'll say my first plan will be antegrade wiring. Then I'll go ADR. Then I'll go retrograde. And I'll make these notes. Actually, nowadays, since we have Epic as our EMR, I just put an Epic note in that patient's chart. That way, when I do meet the patient in the office, I don't have to spend 20 minutes in a busy clinic. Plus, then I'm not very focused as I would be if I'm doing it in the evening when there's no other stressors at that moment, and I'll see things. And I think it takes a lot longer when the films are not films that we ourselves took. Where we would, if I'm planning a CTO, a diagnostic, I would do 10-inch, no panning. The cases we get sent are usually 8-inch. There's lots of panning, and it's hard to see everything we want. But we have to do the best we can with that diagnostic film. So that's what'll happen before I even meet the patient. So then I can talk to the patient, and I can even tell them, usually there's somewhere between 80 and 95% success rate, but yours would be more towards the 80%. Yours might be more towards 95%. I can really give them a little bit more information on what's our chance of getting through. And then the next round happens the night before the case, where, again, I'll take a quick look at the films, review my notes. I'll actually make an equipment list for our staff for the equipment I want them to open going into the case, that I could send them in an Epic message the night before, so that, on the morning of the case, they're not scrambling to find everything I want to start with, especially nowadays with all the supply chain shortages that I'm sure everyone's lab is dealing with. We're often not getting to use that first list of equipment and going to plan A, B, and C on the equipment. So I think that list is helpful for the staff to stay organized and prepare for these cases. But yeah, that's how I would prepare. When patients come to the office, I prefer a family comes to that office visit, just so everyone's on board with what we're doing. I always, verbally communicate the higher risk of perforation. I think that's important for us to tell patients that. I think most of these patients, by the time they meet us, they're just so desperate, and they're just really happy that someone's willing to try to help them. So it could be very rewarding in that regard.
And then, do you feel that you are still learning and growing your skills, or you think you've reached the plateau? How do you feel after all these years of practice and doing a high volume of cases?
No, definitely still learning. This is, as we said, this is a humbling area, which means, even when you get to be very experienced, 90% success is, I think, very good, which means you have that 1 out of 10 failure rate. And it's strange because recently I just went through this where I had this long stretch where it felt like I was getting every case and it was going great. And I was like, oh, I've mastered this. And then, bam, you get hit with those 3 failures in a row, and you really start questioning your abilities and wondering if you have imposter syndrome. I think we're we're always learning. At least I am still. There may be some people out there who've learned it all, but I don't feel that I have. Just recently, I'm thinking of a case where, I had the wire across in the first 15 minutes just with antegrade wiring, and it was a balloon impassable case. And, probably spent 2 or 3 hours working through, I think 6 or 7 of the 9 things we have listed to work through that. And nothing I could try worked. And then, went home stewing and pulled out the 3rd edition and made sure I didn't miss anything. And then went through a couple case reports that have come out recently, and I've decided my list now has 13 things on it. I learned, that I think I left some opportunities on that table because I crossed with the wire so quickly. I had plenty of X-ray time. I could have probably worked through all 13 things. Well, not all 13. I don't think I could have gotten a roto wire to go through there. But it was, so yes, I think we all are still learning, and that's what makes life enjoyable. I think when we stop learning, that's when it's time to move on, probably.
Well, that's perfect. And actually, to be able to function at this high level, what is your secret? Do you exercise? Do you meditate? What do you do to keep in good shape? Because, as you said, you're very busy in your regular practice. You do these very complex cases. How do you keep fit for all of this?
Exercise is something I've always enjoyed since I was young. I played sports in high school, played basketball my first couple of years in high school, but then everyone else grew much taller and could jump much higher than I do. So that ended after my first 2 years of high school. But I played American football all 4 years in high school. And during those years, I fell in love with weight training was an important part of things we did. And as being on the football team, I actually fell in love with that. And that's something I still enjoy, although I don't get to do it as much. But basically, my exercise routine nowadays is, good 4 or 5 days a week, about 30 minutes of something cardio, whether I'm jogging on the treadmill, incline walking on the treadmill. I've got an elliptical. I like to skip rope. I'll do one of those activities. We have a pool in our backyard, and sometimes I'll just swim back and forth, listening to my favorite album. Album shows our age, but just swimming back and forth for 30 minutes, and then every Saturday, as long as it's not a working weekend, I like to do a full body weight training workout. Which when I do that, it's a good 2.5 hours of full body weight training. But nowadays, when I was younger, I was more into the heavy weights. Now joints hurt too much, and if I can't do it 15 times, that means it's too much weight. So it's more of a high repetition kind of weight training workout. But yeah, those are the kind of things I like to do. For me, it's never, exercise is my escape. It's actually something I enjoy doing. I joke, though, that someone who enjoys exercise as much as me should look a lot healthier than I do. But hopefully I'm healthier on the inside than I look like on the outside.
This is perfect. Well, clearly, you keep your energy and motivation and be able to do all these things. That's impressive. But how about the things that excite you the most going forward?
So in the field of CTOs, I'm assuming we're asking this question.
Or in general.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the CTO field. I think that's the topic at hand for the audience. I'm excited about future advances in ADR technologies. I think we've had Stingray for so long as our main reentry device, and I feel like, especially with my experience in the SFA with the Outback, I feel like we should be able to do better and get a little bit more predictability with those more difficult reentry cases. I was listening to one of your podcasts recently, and I'm excited that Bill Nicholson is talking about a new reentry device that he's worked on. And I don't know much about it yet or understand it conceptually, but I'm excited that there's going to be something new to try. I've tried the recross. I think it's an extra tool, but it's not a, I don't think it's going to be a game changer for reentry. So I think I think that's really going to make cases quicker if we can get more predictable reentry. I think it's going to make it safer to go retrograde less and less. And so I think in the CTO space, that's what excites me most. Gosh, what excites me outside of the CTO space? I haven't given that thought. I've sort of got both feet in this box and not really thinking too much of other things.
Yeah.
My daughter's future excites me. I'll say that. That's what I'm most excited about. I've got 2 daughters, and they're becoming very smart, intelligent young women, and I think that's what excites me the most about the future.
Well, congratulations. Are any of them interested in following your footsteps, or they have their own mind?
Oh, gosh, I think I set such a bad example for them. They both say there's no way they're going to be doctors. But we'll see. We'll see. I never took the MCAT when I was in college, so I didn't take it till I went to graduate school for a couple of years. And so we'll see what, I just want them to find their own passions. And, I'm very fortunate. I still feel like I'm 55 now, and I feel that I still wake up excited to go to work in the morning. And I think that's a blessing. And so I just hope my daughters find something like that, something that can excite them and make them happy, and that they can passionately pursue in life. And that's what will make me proud.
And how did the family take, doing those cases and the practice in general? You're very obviously busy, high volume, high intensity practice. How did the family understand or help, or how did you deal with juggling all these balls?
My wife is a pillar of support. She really, I think, makes it possible for me to indulge in my work. I think she has a lot of respect for our profession. So she takes care of a lot. I'm so proud of her. She, I think at times she probably felt like a single mom raising our daughters, because I was so tied up at work. But she does so much for them, so much for, all the things that need to be done around the house. And she's amazing. She's not a stay-at-home wife. She has her own career. She's an attorney. She went to one of the top 10 law schools in the country, was in private practice for most of her career, and then just a few years ago made a career switch and joined the U.S. Department of Justice. I'm not sure how she does everything she does, but she's probably the ultimate pillar of support. My kids have been very supportive in their own way. Neither one of them has rebelled, maybe mini rebellions, but nothing tremendous. And Tulsa's a smaller community, and I think for my kids, part of it is we've had family members, their grandparents have illnesses, so I think they've seen the importance of when there's good doctors to help. And then also in Tulsa, because it's a smaller community, it's very strange how often, if we do go out, we run into a patient of mine or a family member of a patient of mine, and they just walk over and say thank you. Just the other day, my older daughter, Maya, was flying back from Paris, and she was getting on a plane in Dallas, and a patient of mine just walked up to her and said, "Are you Dr. Chandwaney's daughter?" And he saved my life. So I think they've gotten that type of feedback. So I think they also have an appreciation. I mean, I think they wish I was around more than I was when they were growing up, but I think they also feel that what I've been doing is important.
So clearly make an impact, and you never know. People, I guess, can get different influences, different parts of their lives. How about any favorite book or movie that you have?
Honestly, I don't do much leisure reading nowadays. So I think my favorite movie is one from childhood, which I'm sure a lot of people have watched. It's a Wonderful Life. It's a holiday movie with Jimmy Stewart, and I think what grabbed me when I was a child was, it's about a man who makes a lot of sacrifices to serve his community, and then in the end, he goes through a rough time, and he thinks there's no way out. But in the end, of course, his strong wife comes to the rescue, as does the community and his family, to help him for a change. And I think that's the message of the movie that's struck with me. As far as a favorite, book, I'll throw in a plug for you. My favorite professional book is your book, because it's helped me so much develop as a CTO operator. Can't tell you how honored I was. I went from being someone who read your first edition cover to cover twice to learn what I needed to learn, and then when the third edition was coming out, you were kind enough to include me in that project in a very small way, but you were so gracious to invite me, and that meant a lot to me. That's a great book. I feel sorry for the guys who are just starting with CTOs, because the third edition is almost 3 times as thick as the first edition. So I think reading it to cover will be a bigger task for people. But that's a great book. As far as leisure reading, again, I don't get to do much nowadays because most of my reading is invested in professional reading. But I would say my favorite book of all time is To Kill a Mockingbird. Again, a book I read as a child. It's I think considered a classic. Most people are familiar with it, but it's a story about it's told from the eyes of a child named Scout, and I think there's 2 underlying sub stories in the book. One is about this African American gentleman who's being persecuted for crimes that he never committed, who's actually a very good man, and Scout's father is defending him through that. In the end, because this book takes place at a time when racism was so prevalent in our country, he is found guilty of those crimes. And then there's another sub-story about Arthur Radley, who's known as Boo to everyone in the neighborhood. He's supposed to be the scary person, but in the end of the movie, and then at the end of the book, he actually saves Scout's life and turns out to be this very gentle man. And I was thinking about how did this book connect it all to what we do in CTOs. And I would just say, I think it's about, a lot of these CTOs we get sent, when you look at the angiogram, it just looks horrible, and most operators would not take a second look. But as CTO operators, we look at these angiograms and we just see this beautiful artery that we can reconstruct. And by the time we're done with the case, it often looks like the artery that these people were born with. So it's about, taking a deeper look at things that others would say aren't even worth that second look.
Well, I must admit, this is the first time that I see the analogy, but you're right. It makes perfect sense, and a great way to see it. Sometimes you have to look beyond the surface to what is behind. So Raj, what are you most proud of over you've done so many things, personal and professionally. What are the things that you're most proud of?
Okay, thank you. So I'll start personally, because I should do that. I think usually I've put my professional goals ahead of my personal goals. So this time I'm gonna start personally. So I'm most proud of my daughters. They're just such great kids. My older daughter, Maya, is going to start her junior year at the University of Chicago. She's studying biochemistry. She's this incredible kid. She was blessed with this amazing brain, which just since she was a child, just could absorb all sorts of information and retain it. And she's going to hate that I'm going to throw this out there, but she was suggested to take her ACT a year ahead of schedule, and all she did was sort of read through this couple of study books, and she takes it and she gets a perfect score. Just one of those amazing brains that I envy, because I wasn't like that. But
I'm not so sure about that.
But she's so she's right now. She says medicine is not her path, and I hope she finds her path. She's interested in science. She loves science and math, and so I hope she finds a way to apply those talents that God gave her. I'm not a particular religion. I was born Hindu, but I don't think I'm a very good Hindu. But I believe strongly in God, and I believe that our talents are God's gift to us, and when we use our talents to help other people, that's our gift back to God. My daughter is not religious; she doesn't believe in God, but I'm hoping she'll see the world that way and find a way to use her amazing talents to help other people. My second daughter, Avni, is starting her senior year in high school, and she wants to study film. And I'm equally proud of her. I think she's this amazing child. I'm so happy that she has a dream. She's already figured out something she's passionate about, and I'm going to do everything I can to support her in pursuing that dream. So we're going to be looking at some schools in a couple of weeks in Los Angeles, and hopefully, I'm excited for her, and I think she's found a passion, and that's the first step to happiness in life. So hopefully we can foster her passion. And I'm proud of my wife again. She's just been incredible with everything that she's done for our family, for her parents, for my parents. She just took on so much, and she's doing all this while I think most important, being a professional career woman, setting that in itself sets a great example for my daughters, and showing them that you can balance all these things and still have a professional career and be successful. I think those are the things I'm most proud of. Professionally, this will sound sort of not important, I think, to most people in this audience, which I'm still very proud that I became a physician. I think we're all physicians, and we're surrounded by physicians, and that no longer feels special, I think, to many of us. But I think it's a very special job. I think people trust us during the most vulnerable moments of their life, and I think if we value that and take it seriously, I think this is still a very special job. I know some people are getting burnt out and they don't feel that way anymore. But in that way, the CTO space is great because people are just so appreciative when we try to help them. I've had patients, even when I fail on their CTO, they're just so happy that I tried. And I think it's a very special job. The other thing I'm proud of professionally is honestly what I and my partners have done here in Tulsa. We've taken this 12-man group, and really this is not all me, this is really under the leadership of my senior partner, Wayne Leinbach. He's a very charismatic leader here, and I think we've built this incredible program here in Tulsa, which I know to most of the folks out there is just a flyover state. We have, even when I got here, we had a cardiac MRI program when many universities did not have cardiac MRI. We have an advanced heart failure program. We have Destination LVAD now. We have an ECMO program that saved so many lives during COVID. We have this amazing PERT team, doing incredible things. Amazing advanced imaging specialists. Great peripheral vascular program. Just so many things in this center in middle of Oklahoma that I think there's many universities, programs that I think don't offer as much as we do here in this program that we've constructed here at Oklahoma Heart Institute. And I'm so proud of that and the role I played, and the coronary CTO program's not bad either.
Well, that's very modest. I would say it's one of the best programs in the Midwest, and you've done a phenomenal work, growing it and offering options to, you say, people who often don't have that option. So Raj, just to tie it up and give us your final comments. So if you had to advise someone who is like in your shoes 20 years ago, who is getting into this, wants to learn to do CTO and complex, what would be the top key things you think would help them reach a great level and learn and get better at what they want to do?
Yeah, I think obviously, I think there's the figure out how you learn best. Some people that will be proctoring, some people that will be attending lectures, some people that will be reading, a combination of some of those. I think, by this stage, I think most of us have figured out how we learn best and apply that. It's not a one size fits all. I think most importantly, though, is when you're going through this process, even at my stage, part of it is, you want to be successful, but when the challenges come your way in a case, don't let your frustrations get the better of you. Embrace the challenges, because that's when we grow and become better. And so instead of, saying a 4-letter word, when that challenge comes up in the lab, embrace it. And sometimes I'll joke with our staff, and sorry, I meant to say a plug for my cath lab staff. So, and I'm just going to say it right now because I think I have amazing cath lab staff. They're all there for the right reasons. They work so hard to support me on these long, difficult cases. I just want to make sure I take a moment to let them know how much I appreciate them. But coming back to the question, embrace these challenges. That's how we'll grow. I'll joke with my staff sometimes that if we have a quick case, they're all happy. We're getting off the table quick, and I'll say, "Oh, there was no personal growth during this case. What a waste of time." They're all rolling their eyes at that point. As a CTO operator who's growing and learning, and I still am. When those challenges come up, embrace them, because as you work through those, even if you don't succeed on that case, those are the moments that will make you better as you reflect on them later.
Perfect. So essentially, the more challenges we have and problems, then we should be the happier we should be because we're growing.
Yeah.
Which is not easy to do, but I completely agree with you that this is the better way to go. And I could not agree more that, sometimes we forget that actually you're right. We're treating people at some of their most vulnerable moments, and what we do does matter. And that in itself can provide huge motivation for everything we do.
Absolutely.
But Raj, again, thank you so much. It was wonderful talking to you today. Really, thanks so much for everything you do and for setting, I think, a great example for everyone, both the ones who are learning, I think all of us are learning anyway, into this area and other areas as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Manas, and thank you for everything you've done for our profession. I really appreciate you so much. And you've done so much for our profession, and I really value everything you've done for us.
Thank you for listening to the Sensei podcast.